Article 100 Definitions Part 4. Overcurrent protective device. Supplementary. A device intended to provide limited overcurrent protection for specific applications and utilization equipment such as luminaires and appliances. This limited protection is in addition to the protect iron provided in the required branch circuit by the branch circuit overcurrent protective device. CMP10 overload. Operation of equipment in excess of normal, full load rating, or of a conductor in excess of rated ampacity that, when it persists for a sufficient length of time, would cause damage or dangerous overheating. A fault, such as a short circuit or ground fault, is not an overload. CMP10 panel board. A single panel or group of panel units designed for assembly in the form of a single panel, including buses and automatic overcurrent devices, and equipped with or without switches for the control of light, heat, or power circuits, designed to be placed in a cabinet or cutout box placed in or against a wall, partition, or other support, and accessible only from the front. CMP9 photovoltaic PV system. The total components and subsystem that, in combination, convert solar energy into electric energy for connection to a utilization load. CMP4 plenum. A compartment or chamber to which one or more air ducts are connected and that forms part of the air distribution system. CMP3 portable equipment. Equipment with electrical components suitable to be moved by a single person without mechanical aids. CMP14 power outlet. An enclosed assembly that may include receptacles, circuit breakers, fuse holders, fuse switches, buses, and what our meter mounting means, intended to supply and control power to mobile homes, recreational vehicles, park trailers, or boats, or to serve as a means for distributing power required to operate mobile or temporarily installed equipment. CMP19 premises wiring system. Interior and exterior wiring, including power, lighting, control, and signal circuit wiring together with all their associated hardware, fittings, and wiring devices, both permanently and temporarily installed. This includes a wiring from the service point or power source to the outlets, or B wiring from and including the power source to the outlets where there is no service point. Such wiring does not include wiring internal to appliances, luminaires, motors, controllers, motor control centers, and similar equipment. CMP1 informational note. Power sources include, but are not limited to, interconnected or standalone batteries, solar photovoltaic systems, other distributed generation systems, or generators. Pressurized as applied to hazardous classified locations. The process of supplying an enclosure with a protective gas with or without continuous flow at sufficient pressure to prevent the entrance of combustible dust or ignitable fibers flying. CMP14 process seal as applied to hazardous classified locations. A seal between electrical systems and flammable or combustible process fluids where a failure could allow the migration of process fluids into the premises wiring system. CMP14 purged and pressurized as applied to hazardous classified locations. The process of one purging, supplying an enclosure with a protective gas at a sufficient flow and positive pressure to reduce the concentration of any flammable gas or vapor initially present to an acceptable level. And 2. Pressurization. Supplying an enclosure with a protective gas with or without continuous flow at sufficient pressure to prevent the entrance of a flammable gas or vapor, a combustible dust, or an ignitable fiber. CMP14 informational note. For further information, see ANSI or NFPA for 96213. Purged and pressurized enclosures for electrical equipment. Qualified person. One who has skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of the electrical equipment and installations, and has received safety training to recognize and avoid the hazards involved. CMP1 informational note. Refer to NFPA 70x10⁻2012, standard for electrical safety in the workplace, for electrical safety training requirements. Raceway. An enclosed channel designed expressly for holding wires, cables, or busbars, with additional functions as permitted in this code. CMP8 informational note. A raceway is identified within specific article definitions. Rainproof. Constructed, protected, or treated so as to prevent rain from interfering with the successful operation of the apparatus under specified test conditions. CMP1 raintight. Constructed or protected so that exposure to a beat-ing rain will not result in the entrance of water under specified test conditions. CMP1 receptacle. A contact device installed at the outlet for the connection of an attachment plug. A single receptacle is a single contact device with no other contact device on the same yoke. A multiple receptacle is two or more contact devices on the same yoke. CMP18 receptacle outlet. An outlet where one or more receptacles are installed. CMP18 remote control circuit. Any electrical circuit that controls any of the circuit through a relay or an equivalent device. CMP3 retrofit kit. A general term for a complete subassembly of parts and devices for field conversion of utilization equipment. CMP18 sealable equipment. Equipment enclosed in a case or cabinet that is provided with a means of sealing or locking so that live parts cannot be made accessible without opening the enclosure. CMP1 informational note. The equipment may or may not be operable without opening the enclosure. Separately derived system. An electrical source, other than the service, having no direct connection as to circuit conductors of any other electrical source, other than those established by grounding and bonding connections. CMP5 service. The conductors and equipment for delivering electric energy from the serving utility to the wiring system of the premises served. CMP4 service cable. Service conductors made up in the form of a cable. CMP4 service conductors. The conductors from the service point to the service disconnecting means. CMP4 service conductors, overhead. The overhead conductors between the service point and the first point of connection to the service entrance conductors at the building or other structure. CMP4 service conductors, underground. The underground conductors between the service point and the first point of connection to the service entrance conductors in a terminal box, meter, or other enclosure, inside or outside the building wall. CMP for informational note. Where there is no terminal box, meter, or other enclosure, the point of connection is considered to be the point of entrance of the service conductors into the building. Service drop. The overhead conductors between the utility electric supply system and the service point. CMP for service entrance conductors. Overhead system. The service conductors between the terminals of the service equipment and a point usually outside the building, clear of building walls, where joined by tap or splice to the service drop or overhead service conductors. CMP for service entrance conductors. Underground system. The serve-ICE conductors between the terminals of the service equipment and the point of connection to the service lateral or underground service conductors. CMP4 service equipment. The necessary equipment, usually consisting of a circuit breaker S or switch ES and fuse S and their accessories, connected to the load end of service conductors to a building or other structure, or an otherwise designated area, and intended to constitute the main control and cutoff of the supply. CMP4 service lateral. The underground conductors between the utility electric supply system and the service point. CMP4 service point. The point of connection between the facilities of the serving utility and the premises wiring. CMP for informational note. The service point can be described as the point of demarcation between where the serving utility ends and the premises wiring begins. The serving utility generally specifies the location of the service point based on the conditions of service. Short circuit current rating. The prospective symmetrical fault current at a nominal voltage to which an apparatus or system is able to be connected without sustaining damage exceeding defined acceptance criteria. CMP10 show window. Any window, including windows above doors, used or designed to be used for the display of goods or advertising material, whether it is fully or partly enclosed or entirely open at the rear, and whether or not it has a platform raised higher than the street floor level. CMP2 signaling circuit. Any electrical circuit that energizes signaling equipment. CMP3 symbol apparatus as applied to hazardous classified local ions. An electrical component or combination of components of simple construction with well-defined electrical parameters that does not generate more than 1.5 volts, 100 milliamperes, and 25 megawatts, or a passive component that does not dissipate more than 1.3 watts and is compatible with the intrinsic safety of the circuit in which it is used. CMP14 informational note. The following apparatus are examples of simple apparatus. 1 passive components, for example, switches, junction boxes, resistance temperature devices, and simple semiconductor devices such as LEDs. 2 sources of stored energy consisting of single components in simple circuits with well-defined parameters, for example, capacitors or inductors, whose values are considered when determining the overall safety of the system. 3 sources of generated energy, for example, thermocouples and photocells that do not generate more than 1.5 volts, 100 milliamperes, and 25 with special permission, the written consent of the authority having jurisdiction. CMP1 standalone system. A system that supplies power independently of an electrical production and distribution network. CMP4 structure. That which is built or constructed, other than equipment. CMP1 surge arrestor. A protective device for limiting surge voltages by discharging or bypassing surge current. It also prevents continued flow of follow current while remaining capable of repeating these functions. CMP5 surge protective device SPD. A protective device for limiting transient voltages by diverting or limiting surge current. It also prevents continued flow of follow current while remaining capable of repeating these functions, and is designated as follows. Type 1. Permanently connected SPDs intended for installer tie-in between the secondary of the service transformer and the line side of the service disconnect overcurrent device. Type 2. Permanently connected SPDs intended for installation on the load side of the service disconnect overcurrent device, including SPDs located at the branch panel. Type 3. Point of utilization SPDs. Type 4. Component SPDs, including discrete components, as well as assemblies. CMP5 informational note. For further information on Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, and Type 4 SPDs, see UL 1449. Standard for surge protective devices. Switch, bypass isolation. A manually operated device used in conjunction with a transfer switch to provide a means of directly connecting load conductors to a power source and of disconnecting the transfer switch. CMP13 switch, general use. A switch intended for use in general distribution and branch circuits. It is rated in amperes, and it is capable of interrupting its rated current at its rated voltage. CMP9 switch, general use app. A form of general use switch constructed so that it can be installed in device boxes or on box covers, or otherwise used in conjunction with wiring systems recognized by this code. CMP9 switch, isolating. A switch intended for isolating an electrical circuit from the source of power. It has no interrupting rating, and it is intended to be operated only after the circuit has been opened by some other means. CMP9 switch, motor circuit. A switch rated in horsepower that is capable of interrupting the maximum operating overload current of a motor of the same horsepower rating as the switch at the rated voltage. CMP11 switch, transfer. An automatic or non-automatic device for transferring one or more load conductor connections from one power source to another. CMP13 switchboard. A large single panel, frame, or assembly of panels on which are mounted on the face, back, or both switches, overcurrent, and other protective devices, buses, and usually instruments. These assemblies are generally accessible from the rear as well as from the front and are not intended to be installed in cabinets. CMP9 switchgear. An assembly completely enclosed on all sides and top with sheet metal, except for ventilating openings and inspection windows, and containing primary power circuit switching, interrupting devices, or both, with buses and connections. The assembly may include control and auxiliary devices. Access to the interior of the enclosure is provided by doors, removable covers, or both. CMP9 thermal protector as applied to motors. A protective device for assembly as an integral part of a motor or motor compressor that, when properly applied, protects the motor against dangerous overheating due to overload and failure to start. CMP11 informational note. The thermal protector may consist of one or more sensing elements integral with the motor or motor compressor and an external control device. Thermally protected as applied to motors. The words thermally protected appearing on the nameplate of a motor or motor compressor indicate that the motor is provided with a thermal protector. CMP11 unclassified locations as applied to hazardous classified locations. Locations determined to be neither Class I, Division 1, Class I, Division 2, Class I, Zone 0, Class I, Zone 1, Class I, Zone 2, Class 2, Division 1, Class 2, Division 2, Class 3, Division 1, Class 3, Division 2, Zone 20, Zone 21, Zone 22, nor any combination thereof. CMP14 ungrounded, not connected to ground or to a conductive body that extends the ground connection. CMP5 uninterruptible power supply, A power supply used to provide alternating current power to a load for some period of time in the event of a power failure. CMP13 ventilated, provided with a means to permit circulation of air sufficient to remove an excess of heat, fumes, or vapors. CMP14 volatile flammable liquid, a flammable liquid having a flash point below 38C10F, or a flammable liquid whose temperature is above its flash point, or a Class II combustible liquid that has a vapor pressure not exceeding 276 kPa 40 psi at 38C10F, and whose temperature is above its flash point. CMP14 voltage of a circuit. The greatest root mean square RMS effective difference of potential between any two conductors of the circuit concerned. CMP1 voltage, nominal. A nominal value assigned to a circuit or system for the purpose of conveniently designating its voltage class, for example, 120 to 140 volts, 480Y to 77 volts, 600 volts. CMP1 informational note number 1. The actual voltage at which a circuit operates can vary from the nominal within a range that permits satisfactory operation of equipment. Voltage to ground. For grounded circuits, the voltage between the given conductor and that point or conductor of the circuit that is grounded. For ungrounded circuits, the greatest voltage between the given conductor and any other conductor of the circuit. CMP1 watertight. Constructed so that moisture will not enter the enclosure under specified test conditions. CMP1 weatherproof. Constructed or protected so that exposure to the weather will not interfere with successful operation. CMP1 Part 2. Over 1000 volts, non-electronically actuated fuse. An overcurrent protective device that generally consists of a control module that provides current sensing, electronically derived time current characteristics, energy to initiate tripping, and an interrupting module that interrupts current when an overcurrent occurs. Electronically actuated fuses may or may not operate in a current-limiting fashion, depending on the type of control selected. CMP10 fuse. An overcurrent protective device with a circuit opening fusible part that is heated and severed by the passage of overcurrent through it. CMP10 controlled vented power fuse. A fuse with provision for controlling discharge circuit interruption such that no solid material may be exhausted into the surrounding atmosphere. Expulsion fuse unit. Expulsion fuse. A vented fuse unit in which the expulsion effect of gases produced by the arc and lining of the fuse holder, either alone or aided by a spring, extinguishes the arc. Non-vented power fuse. A fuse without intentional provision for the escape of arc gases, liquids, or solid particles to the atmosphere during circuit interruption. Power fuse unit. A vented, non-vented, or controlled vented fuse unit in which the arc is extinguished by being drawn through solid material, granular material, or liquid, either alone or aided by a spring. Vented power fuse. A fuse with provision for the escape of arc gases, liquids, or solid particles to the surrounding atmosphere during circuit interruption. Multiple fuse. An assembly of two or more single-pole fuses. CMP10 substation. An assemblage of equipment, for example switches, interrupting devices, circuit breakers, buses, and transformers through which electric energy is passed for the purpose of distribution, switching, or modifying its characteristics. CMP9 switching device. A device designed to close, open, or both one or more electrical circuits. CMP1 circuit breaker. A switching device capable of making, carrying, and interrupting currents under normal circuit conditions, and also of making, carrying for a specified time, and interrupting currents under specified abnormal circuit conditions, such as those of short circuit. Thank you for watching this video. Article 100 Definitions.